Look at the time now. Hey! Gather up the book, pop in the DVD, sit back and enjoy the super awesome BVM. How's it going, bookworms, filmsters? I'm Katana, and welcome back to another BVM. And it looks like it's already time for the holidays. If I think I uploaded this correctly, this should be coming out 3 to 4 days before Christmas. I really don't know. But what better way to spend such a joyous time than to talk about the tragedies of World War II? I honestly cannot think of anything better. No, not in the slightest. And I probably know what you're all thinking. Oh, Katana over here, he's gonna take on the serious story. Better bring out some good jokes! No. I believe that with a story this serious, it will be the right thing to review it with the same respect. And this story is kind of like a tragic comedy, so it's a mixture of like comedy and tragedy. So there will be just a little bit of light humor here and there, but for the most part, this is going to be a very serious review. So, without further ado, let's travel back in time to 1942 Germany and take a look at The Boy with the Striped Pyjamas. The story follows an 8-year-old German boy named Bruno who's living in the time of World War II. Enjoying ignorance in Berlin, he lives with his older sister Gretel, his mother Elsa, their servants, and his Nazi father Ralph. But that life suddenly changes after a dinner with Hitler, in which his father is given a promotion as commandant and is needed to move to Auschwitz. He takes the whole family with him, and from there, life becomes less fun for poor Bruno. He's leaving his 3 best friends behind, living in a home that's always filled with soldiers, relying on the Hope to be his new companions, and just overall boredom. Things begin to change once he explores the concentration camp behind his house, meeting with a Jewish boy named Shmuel. From there, an unlikely friendship grows between these 2 kids, one that makes a bold statement about the world around them. You know, even in the worst of times, you can't feel that bad if it's children we're talking about. It's still somewhat tragic, but charming also in a way. You know what I mean? But anyways, who are we talking about today? Bruno is the main protagonist for this one. He's designed to be one of those simple-minded and naive childs that allows the readers to join in on the journey of understanding. He's also not the kind to shy away from questions either. If he's even remotely curious or interested in something, he would just ask about it without acknowledging the rudeness or the consequences. He does come off as a bit annoying through dialogue because, truth be told, his narrow mind does strain its welcome, but it's a natural child quality, so I'll pass it. Shmuel is the Jewish boy Bruno becomes friends with. And I really hate to say that this is pretty much his only description. I mean, he and Bruno are similar in age, but it's mainly just a Q&A between the two. Bruno initiates the conversations and Shmuel answers as best as he can. You can argue that his dry and bland attitude is due to the conditions he's living through, but because he's limited to that one spot, we don't see much of him aside from dialogue. Gretel is Bruno's older sister, or the hopeless case as he calls her. She's just a generic sister who thinks she knows everything and is occasionally mean and taunting to Bruno. She used to have a group of friends to torment Bruno, but since the move, she's just alone with her doll collections. Doesn't even try to make a connection with her brother. Bruno's parents, Ralph and Elsa, are also present. For a Nazi soldier, Ralph doesn't really come off as a strict and forceful type, at least through Bruno's eyes. And Elsa really isn't involved in this story as much as Ralph, and most of the caretaking with the kids is done through the servants. Speaking of servants, the only one who really makes enough of an impression is the maid, Maria, who interacts more with Bruno in Auschwitz and becomes somewhat of a friend to him. Then I guess I should mention Lieutenant Coulter, as he does stick around long enough to make an impression. He's a young soldier under the command of Ralph, and for now it's best to say first impressions are quite deceiving. I felt a little conflicted after finishing this. I mean, personally, I thought it was a really fun and enjoyable read. But after starting my research and seeing all the 1-star negative reviews on this, I couldn't understand. I really couldn't. But after I started analyzing each of these reviews and seeing why they were given such a rating, I started to understand why. But let's not rush things. We'll start with the good. For the most part, the idea and concept of this story was very interesting. Keeping the perspective through the eyes of a child really nailed the angle of showing innocence through a depressing time. And from a German child no less, that must have been really hard to do. Where everyone who mostly associates Germany and Nazis as one evil icon, it was good to see some light shed on a pure soul who wasn't consumed by the hatred so quickly. Also, the interaction between Bruno and Shmuel added to this message of peace. The son of a Nazi and the son of a Jew interacting as if the war around them was non-existent. Chatting casually without having to realize they're supposed to be enemies. The bringing of these two kids was the main highlight of this book and even acts as a development point for Bruno as he begins to learn a whole different culture aside from his own. And that's all for the good. Now, let's talk about the faults with the story, starting with a small appetizer. To start things off, I think Bruno is too naive of a character that really undermines the reader and their intellect. Bruno is 8 years old, and yet his narrative is written for someone of a younger age or with a mental disability. I mean, he pronounces Auschwitz as Outwith and the Führer as the Fury, and he's corrected of them so many times, but still says them wrong. He's not at that age to join the Hitler Youth Program, but the fact that his father is a Nazi commandant should be reason enough to learn a thing or two about Jews or what's going on. This book kind of downplays the history for readers, thinking that we don't know what's happening when we in fact do. And this leads to one of the biggest things this book was criticized for, its historical inaccuracies. This was the main reason why some Goodreads reviews gave it a low score. Those who were very familiar with the history of World War II and Nazi Germany couldn't take how this story represented the camps more tamed and kid-friendly than they originally were, and even some of the simplest facts were not done right. For one, the fence between Bruno and Shmuel. The book neglected to add the historical fact that these fences were typically electrified and would have more guards patrolling the area and guard towers, so Bruno would have been caught instantly. Also, a plot hole rises from this. If the fence wasn't electrified and that there was an opening underneath that Bruno or Shmuel could fit through, then why hasn't Shmuel ever explored the idea to sneak out? Bring his dad and other Jews to try and attempt to escape from here. I mean, the chance is there. It's right there for the taking. It doesn't have to be soon, but at least form some plan around this. But I think the biggest controversy of this whole history debacle will be Shmuel himself. His existence is a fault because camps would normally kill Jewish kids who weren't deemed fit to work. And it creates a massive confliction because without Shmuel, there would be no story. There would be no impactful message about innocence carried through the children, because in a realistic time period, Shmuel will be killed on the spot for his young age. And there lies the problem with this book in particular. The history is a little askew, but without it, the concept of these two distinct worlds colliding would have never existed. So what would I have to say to fix all this? Give more detail. The history comes first, and if Boyan wanted Shmuel to be alive, then he should have provided more details surrounding that area. Give a reason why Shmuel, and only Shmuel, because the book mentions other kids at the camp, is so special enough to stay alive. What did he have to offer to be considered worthy? I think that quality would have been necessary, extremely interesting to read, and would have given tremendous development to his character. Again, this book has an amazing plot and idea and could have been executed well if more specific details were to better support the faults in history and make the character special. What makes Shmuel different from the rest? Why should we listen to Bruno and his thoughts? And there were some people who even tried defending these faults by bringing up the fact that this story is a fable. That is a fictional story, and that somehow excuses the inaccuracies. For this, I say that those people do have a point. This is a fictional story. The characters aren't based on another family, and it's designed to end with a powerful message. But the fact that it takes place in World War II, on some level, the story should be built around that time. This is a sensitive topic for most people, and some who have read this were actually survivors of the time. I'm not saying that you can't bend the truth of history, but you better be prepared from those who will. And somehow this acts as a great lesson for future writers. If you are wanting to write historical fiction, make sure it's as authentic as you can make it. And this is probably why I like this so much. As I said in my Lord of the Rings review, I'm not a history buff. I mean, I knew about World War II and how bad it was in general, but never paid attention or cared for the specifics. So when reading this book, I put my trust in the writer that his facts were correct and enjoyed the story. But after reading the reviews and learning about the incorrect facts, I understand why the mixed thoughts. Like me, if you're going into this book with little or general understanding about the events of World War II, you're just going to eat up what's being thrown at you and focus more on the narrative story being provided. But if you do understand the history, then these facts are going to be very noticeable, take you away from the intent of the story, and place more focus on how inaccurate these facts are. And since this book is listed as children's literature, then that alone should be more of a reason to get your facts straight. It is the responsibility of a writer to gain trust from his readers, especially when it comes to historical literature. Any young person who's experiencing this book as their introduction to World War II will get the wrong impression, thinking that the camps were not so bad, suppressing the real feeling of how horrible this era was. Not to mention, you will definitely lose credibility and respect in your words. Honesty is important to have in writing. No one's going to read your stuff if you're constantly lying and deceiving. Overall, this book was still enjoyable. Aside from the history, the connection Bruno and Shmuel share is very endearing and shows some sense of humanity and tranquility, even through the harshest of times. And that was the book for you. Some liked it, and others really didn't give it good credit. But now let's check out the movie and see if things improve for the better, or for the worst. So sit back, relax, and enjoy as we review the movie adaptation to The Boy in the Striped Pyjamas. So the movie begins with the opening credits waving the Nazi flag in our faces, easily showing what era this takes place in, and simultaneously switching between scenes of Bruno happily enjoying the Berlin life and his home being packaged up for the move to Auschwitz. I do want to bring more attention to Bruno and his surroundings because it's already showing a lot. You can see the soldiers at work hustling all the Jews out of their homes and into the buses. Since the book only looked through the eyes of Bruno the entire time, there really wasn't much scenery to the beginning and just dived straight into the plot. Bruno comes home wondering why all the furniture is being packed, only to be later explained by Papa Lupin over here that he was promoted to commandant and is moving to the countryside. It's weird seeing him so early on because the book already had him in Auschwitz. Some part of me preferred that he was concealed a bit longer. There was a real suspense to Ralph that just kept you wondering what kind of man would he be once introduced. Would he be ruthless? Would he be a crook? The thoughts were just endless. Before the big move though, they throw one last house party, and I'm guessing it's just for the sole purpose of introducing the grandparents. What's weird is that they don't do the scene where the grandmother causes a scene and makes a disapproving statement about her son's life choices. And bringing that up, Gretel seems to be a little nicer in this version, which I can't say I'm entirely on board with yet. I thought she had one of the strongest personalities in the book, and seeing her reduced to a generic supportive sister doesn't bode well. The dysfunctional relationship she had with Bruno was interesting enough. I'm guessing right now that the movie is trying to spicing up the family drama for later. The next day, Bruno's playing his final game of good guys and bad guys with his three best friends. Not as impactful as the Giver's version, but it's a start. And Elsa calls him down as it is time to leave. We hope you don't forget our names out there! To be honest, this movie only said her name once. Already my mind is feeling a bit hazy. Then they're taking the train ride to Auschwitz where Gretel is praying? Oh my god, are they really replacing Bratty Gretel with a golden child? Characters in this movie almost feel as accurate as the book's history. But seriously, I hope this isn't true. Even Ralph is smelling some bullshit.
Children, look. Look. Our new home.
They get to a new house where Bruno's not looking entirely happy. And this is just me, or does this house look so modernized and out of a catalog from IKEA? And I swear that's not me trying to make some European joke, it was just the first thing that came to mind. But that's not the issue. Seeing the scene between Bruno and Maria puts some confirmation that these characters are complete alternatives from their book counterparts. At this point, Bruno will be complaining to Maria about the move, about his life in Berlin, and it wasn't just done internally but explicitly too through dialogue. Bruno was a speak what's on his mind child, but that's not what we're getting here. None of the characters seem who they are. Bruno's more reserved and calm, Maria's actually more friendly and less work oriented, Gretel's a saint, and Professor Lupin is a Nazi! Who's probably going to develop a habit of playing Yahtzee! while listening on repeat to Lady Gaga's Paparazzi. And also, okay, you get the point. Sort of. For curiosity's sake, Bruno takes a look out his window and witnesses the farm for the first time. He goes down to the kitchen to talk to his mother about it, cueing in Pavel, the vegetable peeler. I think this scene does a great job introducing him based on his clothes and posture and comparing the two types of people in that one singular room. And as Elsa leaves to check out Bruno's window, Ralph brings Bruno into his office to talk about the change. And this scene really shows how bad of an adaptation this is. I mean, the explanation he gives to Bruno about the Jews isn't right.
Why do the farmers wear pajamas? I can see them from my window.
The thing is, Bruno, those people, well, you see, they're not really people at all.
We're not in the eyes of a child anymore. We're seeing the world for what it is now. So the censoring and sheltering isn't really effective anymore because we know what they're talking about. They should just flat out say it. The only time I wish they derailed from the source material. With the window now boarded up, Bruno is bored as shit playing chess with himself when Maria comes in to try and get him to be more active. So he goes outside making plane noises when he notices an open door leading to the backyard where his mother stops him trying to explore it and brings him back inside. They're really exploring more about the camp's present in this movie. I like that. Not just because it moves the plot forward, but it's also getting Elsa more involved in scenes and in the story in general. He's inside drawing what's on his mind and dinner starts with Ralph telling them about being homeschooled from now on. Cause that's what they need. Isolation. And this is what they mean by more details. There's not really an explanation in both the book and movie for them not going to regular school. Is it far away? Does it have a bad reputation? I mean, can't they see how bored the kids are and in need of regular socializing? Also, didn't you promise that they can make new friends?
Anyway, we'll make new ones where we're going, won't we?
Of course you will. You make lots of new friends.
Yeah, like the maid, the peeler, the soldiers, good chums all around. I'm sorry, these are not good parents. Too sheltering at least. So after dinner, Bruno's relaxing outside and sees Gretel flirting with the hot and suave Lieutenant Coulter washing his car. Well, ain't that a treat for the ladies? Bruno does two things. First, he cockblocks his sister's chance at prepubescent love, and second, asks for a tire to make a swing. And I'm glad some characters were brought from page to screen. You can really feel the intensity of Coulter commanding Pavel.
Move! Take this boy to the outhouse in the back garden. There are some tires in there. He will select one, you will carry it wherever he asks. Do you understand?
Actually, this entire scene covers the chapter pretty well. Pavel finding the tire, Bruno swinging and hurting his knee, Pavel treating him, and us learning that he was a doctor before being taken. It's all accurate and depressing by Pavel's emotions. With Bruno's questioning, we get a real glimpse of pain in this man and the kind of life he's been reduced to. The one thing I would say was weird seeing was the moment between Elsa and Pavel. In the book, she tells him to lie about her treating Bruno's wound in order to keep Pavel safe. Am I crazy, or was she more nicer to the servants in the book? In this version, she probably shares a sliver of hate along with Ralph, making it less interesting. I don't know, it's cool that she's getting more screen time, but her character in the book works so well in contrasting Ralph's seriousness and his devotion to his work with the Nazis. The next scene introduces the teacher, Erlitz, and the casting was done right because he can look like anyone's history teacher. He starts talking about their interest in world affairs, and of course, Bruno isn't one of them.
Time to get your head out of those fiction books. Start learning about fact. Time, I think, to turn your mind to the real world, and I believe this would be the perfect start.
Man, don't listen to him, Bruno. One day, reading fiction will actually get you a career. Bored of reading history, Bruno notices the backyard door open again and goes further into climbing out a window, one in which he spotted during the tire finding, and he walks far enough to reach the camp. And luckily, it's the part of the camp that's building new huts. Even looking at it now, there seems to be no guards in sight, at least not as much as I thought there would be. I can kind of see the majority of people's views now. This is starting to lose me a bit. So Bruno finally meets with Shmuel for the first time, and it isn't as engaging or conversational as their moment in the book.
Have you got any food on you? No. Are you hungry?
Shmuel has to go back to work, leaving Bruno alone. This signals Bruno to go back home and steal some food for his new bestie. Oh, that's a good shot. A damn good creepy shot. Also, I think Gretel's blossoming into that teen phase more early in this version, which probably means a possible change in her attitude? Hopefully, let's wait and see. For now, Bruno goes back somehow unnoticed to the camp, and this little scene should make a few historians happy. An electric fence. There you go. History is restored. Yeah, I know. After a short and pretty needless tutoring scene, Bruno waits for his mother to leave and goes back to see Shmuel to ask more questions, like the Pyjamas or the soldiers. And I'm sorry, but this camera shot really shows a problem. There is a guard tower right there in the corner. How is it no one is glancing at the right for the one Jew talking with a kid by the fence? It's an open field, so it should be pretty obvious. But I'm glad to hear Shmuel not beating around the bush and speaking the truth.
Are you not allowed out? Why? What have you done? I'm a Jew.
For some reason, this doesn't bode well with Bruno and he leaves for the day. What comes next is looking more into the evolution of Gretel's persona. It starts with a scene with Elsa taking a gander at her Nazi posters, and then later in the day where Gretel becomes quite temperamental.
There sometimes. Look.
What? Hey!
Gretel.
Hey, that's not fair!
Gretel. What? It's only a game.
Then Elsa goes on to question the teacher, which isn't too far off the truth when you look at the next scene, as they start talking about the Jews and their destructive influence.
There is such thing as a nice Jew, though, isn't there?
I think, Bruno, if you ever found a nice Jew, you would be the best explorer in the world.
I'm not gonna lie, that line frightened me. So much weight carried in those words. Next scene shows Bruno packing up a snack for Shmuel and lying to his mom by not showing what's in the bag. And this next part, I just can't believe it.
Here!
That's so fucking stupid. I get that he's supposed to be naive about the world, but this dumbs it down to a whole new level. And I'm very surprised because it never happens in the book. It shouldn't happen, period. I'm seriously questioning the security of these camps if no one even saw the ball flying or heard the electric fence go off. We're never going to reach the end with this kind of dumbassery. Please, movie, don't add anything new like that. The conversations were engaging enough. So, after almost getting killed, Shmuel runs back to camp and Bruno back home, where we see Elsa noticing the nature of the awful chimney smell thanks to Coulter.
They smell even worse when they burn, don't they?
What?
This leads into a love spat between the parents. Funny because the book's marriage difficulties dealt more with Raph being more distant from the family, and here it's just about Elsa's reaction to the work her husband is doing. She's definitely growing the conscience out of this, but I think I need to see just a bit more to form an opinion. Things get a little darker with the upcoming dinner scene. Grandfather comes to visit the family, and while he's trying to convince Bruno about the wonders of history, Coulter tries to chime in, but accidentally leads into an uncomfortable talk about his runaway father, slowly creating tension with Ralph. The scene gets even more intense with Pavel being asked to serve more wine and then spilling Coulter's drink, which causes him to take Pavel and kick the living shit out of him in front of the whole family. A really nice way to avoid the conversation, but god damn, was that scene both really amazing and just downright brutal. Bruno and Gretel are with each other talking about the aftermath of dinner, and I think we reached the point of Gretel's complete brainwashing as she explains to Bruno about what the farms really are.
It's a camp. What's called a work camp. For Jews, obviously. They're not in there because they're good, silly. They're no good at anything. They're in there because they're evil. They're the enemy.
The enemy? But I think we were fighting.
They're evil, Bruno. Evil, dangerous vermin.
And this really changes the dynamic of Bruno as he's become more lost in thought. Looking at his father with such confliction, making sense of Shmuel and what his sister was talking about. Things get more confusing once he finds Shmuel polishing glasses. Bruno gives him some food and is quickly caught by Coulter.
Answer me!
Elsa. He gave it to me. He's my friend.
Do you know this Jew? Do you know this Jew?
No, I just walked in and he was helping himself. I've never seen him before in my life.
Man, I mean, what could he have done? He's a little kid, someone bigger is screaming in his face, making this seem a whole lot larger than it actually is. Oh, it's just heartbreaking to see him deny the friendship. And Bruno knows it. After being taken away, Bruno goes to his room and beats himself up about what he just did. And it's definitely these moments that highlight what the initial story wanted to show. The real tragedy of a friendship that can never really happen. Shmuel is no longer polishing the glasses. Bruno goes to meet him at the camp, but there isn't anyone waiting. Putting history aside for the moment, this is where the beef of the story is, and I love it. Especially here with the movie putting so much emotion and emphasis into these scenes. The next scene is quite new to me. Ralph invites some of his soldier buddies to watch a propaganda film about concentration camps, and it registers well into giving Bruno more confusing thoughts than he already had. There's none of those happy feelings in the camp, and it's even more sad to see Bruno hugging his father, still clinging on to the fading idea that he's still a good soldier. See, movie, it's scenes like these that make you slightly better. Not this, but this. After a quick scene of Coulter saying goodbye and transferring, Bruno is still coming by the camp and waiting for Shmuel. He finally returns with a banged up eye, and Bruno manages to apologize for denying their friendship. And the response? I swear, some part of me believes that this story was just created to have this one scene, showing that the youth hold the power to change things. This scene is also quite tragic. We see the family already torn apart from this moving experience. Gretel saddened by Coulter's transfer. Bruno asking about people who are probably best assumed dead. And to top it all off,
His father, they've been bombed. Grandmother's dead.
so they come back to Berlin for the funeral, and even that can't be peaceful without Elsa pointing out gifts from Hitler that Grandma wouldn't have wanted, but Ralph having the final say. But a little part of me is glad to see they extended this moment by having Bruno relay the experience back with Shmuel. It really adds more to his questioning persona and gives life to these conversations. Like this, or the propaganda film, Bruno trying to understand and Shmuel giving good answers really straightens their relationship. And also, I think the movie just redeemed itself again by having them play a game that doesn't really bring awareness. I can't forget the whole ball scene, but this somehow makes the world a better place again. Now, let's step back from this tragic friendship and focus more on Elsa and Ralph's straining marriage. After a loud and uncomfortable night of arguing, Ralph brings his two children in to tell them that they'll be leaving Auschwitz in someplace safer with Elsa.
But Dad...
No. It's time for you to move away.
Bruno delivers the bad news to Shmuel, who also has his own problem about his missing father. And this spirals into a whole operation of finding his dad tomorrow by Bruno digging his way under the fence and Shmuel bringing him some extra pajamas that he can somehow acquire without getting caught in order to infiltrate the camp. Yeah, it's pretty obvious to say that this isn't a good idea, but I'm gonna say it anyways. This is not a good idea! The next day, the plan is rolling in motion. Bruno tells another lie to his mom to sneak out. He's running down the forest path with his shovel in hand, meets back with Shmuel, who's got a second layer of clothes on him, and Bruno begins digging his way in. And from here, the tension really picks up. Not from the cute thunder, but because of how it switches back between the searches. The climactic portion of this film trumps the book so much. We get good focus on Elsa realizing that Bruno isn't playing on the swing and organizes a panicking search party for him. Even brings Ralph in to help out. Meanwhile, Bruno is experiencing the camp for the first time, feeling the dread lingering in the air. He's very clear about wanting to turn back but doesn't want to go back on his promise to Shmuel. They go looking in one of the huts where the Jews begin to crowd together and the marching begins. And you want to know why the movie's version is so much better? Because the family finds out quicker. They figure out that Bruno snuck out and desperately go searching for him. It's the fact that everything is happening in the moment that makes this scene so gut-wrenching. In comparison, the book feels more anticlimactic as it talks about the family finding him days later. The epilogue Dad provides takes us out of the moment, but the movie captures it so well. Here's Bruno stripping down naked with the other Jews, huddled together in a confined space, holding hands with Shmuel and bracing for what's to come. And then there's Ralph, who's racing against the clock, desperately trying to reach his only son in time. But that's where the tragedy lies. He doesn't make it. Bruno is gassed with the other members, and then that was beautifully depressing and probably one of the most remarkable scenes I've seen so far in any of these reviews, hands down. Once the deed has been done, everyone is in distraught. Ralph, Elsa, and as we take one last look at Bruno's resting place, the movie fades away on this shot, ending the boy in the striped pajamas. I'm not gonna lie, this was an emotional roller coaster. This was also tough choosing because there were certain scenes in the movies that took me out and then others that reeled me back in. I'm not gonna lie, that whole ball scene was just pushing me away. But once I stuck around to the very end, I understand why these movies made the changes it had. The visuals were excellent, the musical scores backing up the scenes were very precise in hitting the emotional tone. I just had a lot to like about this one, so movie wins. This was a really good adaptation to the book and did try to become its own thing by fixing up things and adding more to the narrative. For instance, if you see the movie from beginning to end, the changes made to the characters make more sense. They have more of a direction with the film and correlated with the idea of how much moving to Auschwitz really changed them. I mean, comparing the scene with them in Berlin and what they become in Auschwitz is so noticeable. Gretel came from being a sweet and innocent child to focusing more on becoming a Nazi thanks to the influence of a crush on culture and the Hitler Youth program instilled by her tutor. Elsa was given more development in this film as she was portrayed with such blindness to the beginning and started to develop a conscience about the horrors that surrounded the camp. Really a step up from the book where her only descriptions consisted of taking long naps and drinking sherries. Ralph being introduced early on was also a good transition from seeing this pleasant and naturally calm father become very authoritative and leaning closer to his work. And even though not all of the history was fixed, at least the movie made an attempt to correct some things, like the electric fence or putting Gretel through the Nazi phase since she was at the appropriate age. Also, taking away the perspective from just Bruno and showing more scenery in the background to complement this boy's growth and understanding really worked in his favor. The movie knew that it was a story about World War II. People know about it and didn't try to shy the audience away from that fact. We were no longer treated like babies who couldn't handle it and gave us a decent image of this time period and how gruesome things were. But the real game changer for me was by far the ending. As I said, the book's ending didn't even come close to the emotion the movie pulled off. Bruno dies and it follows with an epilogue that even acknowledges itself as the end of the story. There's enough to argue that it's a tad more realistic, but the movie found a better way to dramatize the scene. It brought everything together from Bruno's first and last impression of the camp for what it really was, the family not feeling so distant and coming together one last time to look for Bruno, the instrumentals ramping up as the tensions got higher, and the overall tone that showed this scene only leading to utter despair. I mean, I didn't cry at the scene, but it hit me hard, and that alone deserves some props. While I do appreciate the book for existing with its wonderful idea, the execution of it wasn't really brought out to its full potential. It's thanks to the movie that it was able to look at the book, work with its materials, and make changes that will please everyone. And for that, it definitely deserves the win today. With that said, those are my final thoughts on The Boy in the Striped Pajamas. If you don't agree, well then, read the book, watch the movie, and make your own opinion. I'm Katana, and I think because of the title, we'll go back to a female protagonist. Because now we live in a progressive and feministic world, and I don't want to come off as sexist. So, we just covered the boy, now we cover the girl. The girl with the dragon tattoo is up next. Be excited for that, enjoy your holidays, and since I won't be making any video anytime soon, I'll see you all in 2017. Take care, everyone, and happy holidays. Hey guys, just wanted to say thanks again for watching this review. If you enjoyed it, why not click on the subscribe button and stick around for more reviews. Also, I now have a Twitter alongside Facebook for updates and just random postings, so if you'd like to follow me for that kind of stuff, it will be most appreciated. Wasn't that interested in the real world? Well, why not visit the fictional world of Pan Am in my latest review of Catching Fire. There's a war coming and it doesn't look pretty. Got a book/movie review you'd like to see one day? Well, just leave it in the comments down below and I'll be sure to check it out. Until next year, I'm going to enjoy this well-deserved Christmas break of mine. This is the end of season 1 and hopefully season 2 will be much more productive. Happy holidays everyone. Bye!